Welcome to another episode of the Coffee Break Podcast, where our mission is to share business ideas, practices, and strategies while we enjoy our morning coffee break. And we're excited today. My name is Chad Lingefeld with Loc-Doc Security. Our guest today is Ryan Estes, and he is going to be talking with us about all things small business. I'm really excited about this conversation, and we'll be talking with him more in just a minute.
We got so much to say. We got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. It's time for a coffee break. Oh yeah.
All right, welcome back. Thank you for being with us today. Ryan, thank you for taking time out of your schedule. We were just talking a few minutes ago. You just flew in last night, so you're just a quick turnaround. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on.
Yeah, quick turnaround. I had the great privilege of opening a conference yesterday in St. Louis called Destinations International. We had about 1,600 tourism and hospitality executives kicking off a 3-day event in St. Louis, and then I am turning this around and heading right to Puerto Rico first thing in the morning for a big event down there with an insurance partner. So on the move to close out July. So it's good.
That's awesome, man. Well, we first were made aware of you a couple of years ago at the Medico Security Center conference with Assa Abloy. You did a keynote there, kind of closing out that. And I want to talk more about that in a few minutes, but that's kind of how we got to know you a little bit, or aware of you, and reached out to you a couple of months ago to see if we could have a conversation on the podcast, and really appreciate you taking time to do that.
Great to be here.
So one of the things we do on the podcast every week is a recurring segment, Rapid Fire. We do 5 rapid fire questions, 5 randomly selected questions, just to kind of get to know you a little better. You ready?
Hit me.
All right, number 1, if you could eat at only one restaurant forever, what restaurant would it be?
Oh God, I'm gonna go with my favorite neighborhood restaurant here, Spoon and Stable. It's the best. They do it all: brunch, lunch, dinner. I mean, it's the best. So we'll go with that, since it's about 100 yards from my loft. So
there you go. All right, number 2, what is the best gift that anyone has ever given you?
Wow. I was given a book in my early 20s called Think and Grow Rich, and it changed my life. So I'll never forget that gift. Yeah.
Huh. That's good. That question stumps a lot of people, as you really have to think hard. That's an interesting. All right, number 3, if you could eliminate one thing from your daily routine, what would it be and why?
Procrastination, because it extends my workday. So, I would say actually that's interesting. It's a combination of distraction, which leads to procrastination. So these things are dangerous, and to cut that down, I've actually done some real tracking on my time, how many times I pick it up, where I'm spending my time, how often I'm scrolling through Instagram, and it's eye-opening if you're not doing that.
Yeah, there's a book that I recently went through, Free to Focus, from Michael Hyatt, and he talks a lot about that, and it made me really think about that. I put some screen time limitations on my own device, and it's a game changer. And once you actually start looking at that data, it's like, oh my gosh, that is.
Oh yeah,
I've wasted.
They're addictive.
Yes. All right. Number 4, what interesting skill do you want to learn?
I am about to embark on learning how to surf. So I've got a 5-day trip planned to Costa Rica, and we've got surf lessons scheduled every morning. So
I was about to say, you're based out of Minnesota, right?
Yeah, we're not. You can wake surf here on the lakes, but we're gonna do some real surfing in the ocean. So
there you go. And then last question: what is the craziest fashion trend that you ever rocked?
I mean, I was huge on the acid wash jeans in the late '80s, man. So that was fully me.
There you go. All right, you passed a score of 437, so very good.
Deal.
We appreciate you playing. So going back into the conversation, a couple of years ago at the Medico Security Center conference with Assa Abloy, you came in and did the closing keynote speech there, and I actually went through and pulled up all my notes from that speech that I had. You were talking about essentially initiating continuous reinvention. That was one of the points that you had. Talk a little bit about how you're seeing that in the small business environment, why it's relevant. What does that mean? First of all, continuous reinvention.
Yeah, so I think this is a huge one for small business owners, and it's very particularly relevant today. One of the things I see is that success breeds complacency, and it's so easy just to spend all your time working kind of in the business versus on the business and on yourself. I think that's a trap that a lot of entrepreneurs or small business owners get into, especially if they've had some degree of success. And so my point is that you have to have a foot in two worlds as a small business owner today. You have to have the drive to execute and perform given today's current competitive landscape and marketplace reality, while simultaneously maintaining the discipline to continue to reinvent yourself, to take risks, make investment, conduct experiments, disrupt yourself before the competition and marketplace does it for you. And it is the balance of those two things that propel a business forward into the future.
What are you seeing as you're traveling around the country talking with folks and giving these speeches? What are you seeing the biggest reason why people, like, I guess, push away from that or struggle with that the most? Like, what is the reason for it?
Change is hard, and I think naturally what comes up for people is this natural resistance or fear of failure, that if we make that investment, it's not going to work out. If we move in this direction, there's too much risk associated with that. And you see the businesses, particularly small businesses that create breakthroughs, they take intelligent risks. They hedge, they mitigate it, they do their due diligence and research. But the way I look at it is I always have to be conducting 3 little experiments in my business. And the goal of an experiment isn't to have big breakthrough success or create an additional revenue stream. It's to learn. So I have to continue to learn, test, get feedback, and iterate. Success is iterative, and it's a process. So I think it's just the way we're wired or conditioned to deal with change or getting uncomfortable. But for a small business owner today, you've got to get more comfortable being uncomfortable. That's when you grow, and that's the place you want to be. So conduct experiments all the time.
Just try things out, see what works, and fix what doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, you got to try, and part of it is too, it's having a clear and compelling vision of the future. Where do you want to be 5 years from now? Understanding that the world around you, the customers, the competitive landscape is constantly evolving. So you have a clear and compelling vision, and then you look for areas of opportunity. I'm doing a bunch of experiments with my marketing strategy right now, and I think that's a big area of opportunity for a small business, right? The playing field is leveled. You can connect with anybody, anywhere, influence relationships, elevate your reputation. I mean, I can compete in Bucharest, Romania with the biggest consulting companies in the world for a piece of business now, right here from Minnesota as a small business owner. That's new, but I'm not going to get there if I'm not conducting experiments.
Well, and it's very true. So just to exemplify that, I mean, the reason that we're having this conversation right now is because I sent you a direct message on Instagram. The reach is there. There was no other real mutual connection other than just hey, would you be willing to do this? So the reach is out there. Like, you don't have to be neighbors with somebody for this to happen. It's just working that system.
Yeah, it's the reach, it's the relationships. But you know what you have to be doing? You have to embrace the tools and technologies that are part of this communication revolution. And case in point, this is a very good example. So as a small business owner listening to this, who have I connected with through direct message on Instagram? What podcasts have I been invited to be on? Who is helping me move my message into the marketplace? And that's a pretty quick checklist. Just here a couple minutes into this podcast, we could say, wow, I'm not getting those opportunities. Why? And then maybe it's time to conduct an experiment.
Yeah. So with that, we just last week on the podcast, we had actually one of our app developer was on, and we were talking about the Agile methodology of app development and how it's try something, get it out there, get user feedback, and then fix what doesn't work and keep on going. So it's really, I think what you're talking about is very similar to that. It's just doing that in the business realm rather than just the development side.
It is, and it's a great way for a small business owner to think, but it's contradictory, right? So we've been conditioned where we want the recipe baked perfectly before we let anybody taste it, and that's just the world's moving too fast now. that was the old way of thinking. And look, I come from a Fortune 500 company. There were processes and protocols and testing, and everything had to be just perfect. And then we talk to a customer about it, and that's dead. That's actually a recipe for getting disrupted, which is exactly what happened in that business. But you have to move faster than that. And the advantage that a small business owner, an entrepreneur has is speed. Yeah. You know, it's you know, conduct the experiment, test, iterate, get feedback, adjust course. That's the way we need to work. So
one of the things that you mentioned, and I don't want to give away your entire presentation, but I've got lots of notes here. One of the things that you mentioned was schedule time to do this reinvention. And I think that's one of the things you talked about. It really kind of spoke to me, is that we talk about it a lot, but then you get busy. You know, you walk out of that conversation and then it's, well, everything else has hit the fan. So where do we go from here?
Yeah, I always say what gets scheduled gets done. So when I'm working with or doing any executive coaching or working with an entrepreneur, and I talk to them about their priorities, if anybody talks to me about innovation or time to work on the business, I just do a calendar inspection. I said, okay, if that's priority, let me look at your calendar, and we can go over the last couple of weeks and pretty much map your time to your priorities. And so, you know, there's this thing called the 5-hour rule that a lot of entrepreneurs use. It's scheduling 5 hours to work on yourself and your business each and every week. I think that's critical. I've embraced that. I also take sabbaticals. I take mini sabbaticals. So this whole thing we talked about, surfing and learning, I'm off from August 7th to September 6th. And that's time to work on myself and the future of my business. Now, when I say off, that means I'm not going to be on the road speaking I have no scheduled calls and no scheduled meetings.
Sure.
It doesn't mean I won't work, but the work product coming out of that is intended to map to the future.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Going back to something you were saying earlier about taking risk and all of those things, have you read the book Shoe Dog by Phil Knight?
I have read the book Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. It's a great book. Great. I mean, every entrepreneur should read that.
It is. I'm almost finished with it. I'm in the mid 70s right now of the book. Okay. But it really talks a lot about, you know, it's an interesting process, the struggles that they had for so many years, but it was constantly trying something and putting it out there and see what worked. And it was they really worked on taking risk for a bigger reward down the line. And I think that's really kind of speaks to what you're talking about a lot.
Yeah, in that book is baked in so much curiosity and courage, right? I mean, he had this just kind of innate, natural. I mean, at that time in the world, for him to travel abroad and go explore things and just feel his own innate curiosity, and then really believe that there was a better way, and the courage and to kind of stay the course. Yeah. And it's, you know, so many people give up in the red zone, right? You know, your breakthrough's right in front of you, and you're taking on the pain, and the water's coming in, and you're under siege, and your back's against the wall. You just kept going. Seth Godin wrote a great book on that, for a great book called The Dip. It's about knowing when to quit. And Phil Knight was obviously someone that, you know, he persevered through his dip, and you know, the rest is history, as they say.
One of the stories in there that really has stuck out to me was, and it's a simple thing, where he was talking about one of the shoe lines that they were launching. And it was kind of at this turn where people were actually starting to use shoes, where sneakers more for fashion and more than just on the track or just for sport. And he realized it, and he said, make that shoe in blue so it'll go with jeans better. And like that one little pivot. And he said that they had people begging on their hands and knees to get more and more shoes, and it totally changed the trajectory of a shoe line, because they just changed the color of a shoe based off of watching what's happening in the market.
Well, I think that's a real important lesson for small businesses. I tell a lot of small business owners, you know, the business you have today is not going to be the business you have in 5 years. And whether it's a micro pivot or a massive overhaul, you have to pay close attention to the marketplace and let customers guide you on where to go. That's certainly been true for the iteration of my own business. And so a great action item for a small business owner out of that would be, do you have a CAB, which is a client advisory board? Do you have 4 or 5 customers that you've asked to participate with you as a formal advisory? so you can iterate in lockstep with what your customers need and want. It's a great customer retention tool, but it's also a strategy that helps you pivot and evolve your business consistent with what customers want in the future. It's just, and a lot of small business owners don't do it, but it's a great opportunity.
I want to take a detour on that because this has been something that I've talked about wanting to do for the past several years and never taken action on it. How do you see, so a client advisory board, having a customer advisory board, having people that you're doing work with come in and tell you what you're doing well and what you're not doing well so that you can improve on it. How do you see, I mean, have you seen businesses that have done it in the small business realm that have successfully, and kind of what's step one of that?
I mean, so yes, I've seen small businesses do it well and do it extremely well, and almost use it as a growth strategy. So the initial, advisory board, they were very carefully selected, but they became brand evangelists, and they were very instrumental, those case studies and those relationships, in helping convince the next wave of customers and the next wave. And then have a user conference, and you could just see it, how perpetually it grows. But people get overwhelmed with, well, I don't know how to structure that. Keep it simple. Send 4 customers, and you can do it right now. Send 4 customers an email, putting together a client advisory board, deeply respect your opinion and contribution, would love for you to participate. All that's required is a 30-minute conversation once a quarter where I can gain your insight, perspective, and you can help us iterate the business forward to be a better vendor, provider, partner. That's it. And, I always say my client advisors and my personal advisory board, the people I've asked to do it, I have access to some great thinking, and, the pay is free beer. So that's the deal, man. Keep it simple.
No, that's awesome. And going back to, I just pulled up this from the notes from when you spoke before. Pay attention to the opportunities that customers are using to make decisions. I think that's exactly what you were just talking about.
That's it.
So moving into that, one of the things that I think was instrumental in listening to you before, and I want to kind of talk about some of the other things that I know that you're out there sharing. But one of the big things that I took away from the conversation that you had, I believe it was in Orlando, Florida, with us, was all of this information is great. All right, so we've got all these podcasts, we've got all these conferences, we've got all this stuff coming at us, and we get ramped up. And the one statement that you made was, what do you do Monday morning at 8:01 when you get back home? Talk a little bit about that and your philosophy on that.
Yeah, so I attend about 80 conferences a year. Obviously, I do a lot of keynote speaking. And so my point around being at these events where all this information's coming, where we're drinking out of a fire hose, is that the most important minute of that investment is 8:01 a.m. when you walk back into your business. What are you going to go do and do differently? And it's so easy to set all of the notes and the ideas and the podcast and the workbook on the shelf and get right back into cleaning out your inbox and your email. And then none of that good thinking or knowledge transfer gets put into practice. So my point is, have an action plan. Pick 2 or 3 ideas from a learning experience that you can immediately implement to create momentum. Communicate around that. Rally people around that. Right? Be intentional about what you can disrupt inside your own business, or what you can improve upon or make better, or what experiments you're not conducting, and have a plan about that. And you can't do 74 things at once. Pick 2 or 3 things and take action on them. And that's kind of the point. So
with all that said, you're traveling, you just said 80 conferences, you're having these conversations. You're not just giving the same conversation over and over again. What is the kind of the ultimate theme behind what your kind of mission is? What are you trying to communicate to people?
Adapt and thrive. I mean, that's the title of the last ebook we published, and it really is about having this healthy appetite to initiate change and to play offense and leverage this time of transformation as an opportunity. So, I want to help individual contributors maximize their potential, right? Become the best version of who they are as both entrepreneurs, sales professionals, or business leaders. And then I want to help organizations prosper into the future. So there's a lot. I mean, that's a very broad, general theme. There's a lot that goes into that. And then we break it down based on the audience we're talking to. But at a high level, that's really the underlying message. And that's why we called our last publication Adapt and Thrive. That's what we're talking about.
Ryan, how did you get into this? What was the transformation from? I guess you talk a little bit about your history of what kind of got you so passionate about working with and developing businesses.
Pain. The pain fueled my passion. So I was an executive for an advertising agency. And we were navigating the Great Recession, and I thought we just made some really unfortunate decisions, missteps that I personally disagreed with. And I saw an opportunity, but we had to do the things I'm talking about. We had to be bold and decisive and reinvent ourselves and take risks and venture into uncharted territory and transfer. And we didn't do any of those things. We retreated, resisted, got complacent, shut down, tried to cost cut our way to the future, all of the mistakes and missteps. And, I got to a point where I just decided for myself, I'm not going to help run somebody else's business sideways for the sweet spot of my career. So I walked. January of 2009, which may have been the worst time to do it, I resigned and I started this business. And I just, it was through that experience that a lot of my thinking got around change and change leadership got solidified, because I saw I saw the repercussions of resistance to change. I felt them personally. I lived through 4 rounds of layoffs, and it didn't have to be that way. But what's interesting is a decade later, how the pace of change has accelerated. And these ideas are even more relevant and more critical for small business owners in 2019 as we approach 2020.
It's wild. So you had a front row seat to see some of that resistance, and now you're able to kind of communicate that to the people that are out there doing those and making those decisions now. What are some things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis to stay sharp? You talked about taking some sabbaticals to kind of work on yourself, but what are some things that you're doing and say, hey, these are things that are working for me to stay sharp, to stay active, so I know what's going on?
Yeah, I'll give you just off the top of my head. So, and some of the things I've touched on. I have a pretty disciplined morning routine. So, I get up and I'm intentional about, getting a little kind of time for meditation or clarity. I do a little journaling. I have a gratitude practice. I have intention setting for the day. Another big routine of mine. I believe so much of success, the foundation of it's just little habits, right? These kind of routines and rituals we perform consistently. Another one of mine is, I'm pretty focused on kind of mental and physical health this year. So 5 workouts a week, that's scheduled. I know I'm working out at 4:30 today, and I take that block of time as serious as any meeting with the CEO. Nothing will disrupt that. And that's just based on my schedule where I fit that in. I talked about the advisory board stuff. I have a client advisory board. I have a personal advisory board too. So I think a lot of times as a small business owner, entrepreneur, the work can be isolating, right? And I work alone a lot. Whether I'm creating content, I'm writing, or I'm traveling, 100 days a year by myself. So I have to have people that I can, reach out to, collaborate with. That's been essential for me. Making time to read is important. And then these breaks, these built-in, they're not just vacations where I go to the beach and I drink margaritas. They're intentional, right? So I'm using some of this time to work on myself and on my business versus just in the business. And I think those are 4 or 5 things that have helped me navigate the last 5 years for sure.
What are some things that you're reading now that you would recommend to those that are watching or listening?
Yeah, well, we talked about a book I read not long ago called Shoe Dog, which is a great book. I'll tell you a book I'm reading now that I absolutely will recommend, and it's great for entrepreneurs. It's not a business book though, but it's more of an introspection book. It's called The Second Mountain. And it really talks about, you get to a point in life where, and Ray Dalio talks about this, another great book for entrepreneurs called Principles. There's these 3 stages of life. And the first stage is you're kind of dependent. You grow up with your family of origin. You become 18. You go out into the world. Then there's the second stage of life, which is very achievement focused, right? Maybe you get a job. You're focused on your career. Maybe you get married. You have a family. You're going up this mountain. And typically on the ascent of that first mountain, you encounter some turbulence. In some cases, you fall off. You lose a job, you get divorced, you lose a parent, all things that happen to all of us, right? And I certainly fell off my first mountain, and that's usually a time at life. For me, it was right around when I was 40. We went into the Great Recession. I lost a job. I quit my job. I tried to start a business. My relationship ended. All of these things happen, and you start to, you question the meaning and purpose behind it all, and you start to reflect on that and make decisions that prepare you to ascend your second mountain. And so I haven't finished the book yet. Mm-hmm. I would say I'm halfway through it, but it's a phenomenal read. So the people I'm going to Costa Rica surfing with, we're all reading this book, and then we're going to talk about it during kind of this experience. And so that's a lot of fun. The other thing I'm a big fan of is just the podcast format, the audio format, what we're doing here. If you see me in an Uber, in an airport, on a plane, I always have my earbuds in. I'm always rolling a podcast. So I think that, for me, that kind of micro learning has just been essential to, staying sharp and challenging myself.
So as you're traveling around and you're talking with these small business owners, and you said adapt and thrive. You've talked about reinventing yourself. All these these things. I guess the process. Because you also do business consulting as well, that it's just kind of giving people the actual practical tools to be able to execute on, because it all sounds great in theory, but it's what is the actual, how do I get it going? It's everybody's talking about it right now, but what do you, it's the small thing just to put it in gear.
Yeah, I mean, and it's different for everybody. Some small business owners have issues with sales growth. Some have issues with, delivery and protecting their margins. Others have, so it's different across the board. But yeah,
is there an exercise, or is there anything that you're doing to helping people kind of discover what that one thing is that they need to really focus on, or are you finding that people know what it is, they just don't have the focus or energy to go?
No, I would say it's a combination of both. I mean, if I was doing a deep dive consulting engagement, we would start with quantitative and qualitative research, right? So we would come in and do some assessment work and some analysis work, both on the numbers, the history, the trajectory. We conduct some interviews, potentially talk to a few clients, and then I think we'd get a pretty clear picture of the challenges and the opportunity specific to that business, and then make some strategic recommendations. But I think a great exercise for any owner, a small business owner, is decide what you want. Get clarity around where you want to be 5 years from now. And great exercise, and this helped me too, was wake up on a Wednesday 5 years from now and tell me about your perfect day. Color it up. Where are you? How are you spending your time? Who's with you? What does it smell like? What does it feel like in your body? How do you carve your time? Who'd you have breakfast with? Who'd you have dinner with? Paint that up for me. And when you get that kind of clarity, when you know where you're going, you can take just dead aim, and you have a much better chance of getting what you want. So many people just kind of go through the motions, and they deal with the crisis of the moment, and they want to be here, but 2 years they drift way over here, and there's this massive gap between the business and life they want and the business and life they have. And I'd like to think that some of our work and ideas help people close that gap.
So it's trying to find that vision of what the future looks like, so that you can figure out a path to get there, because a lot of times we're short-sighted and we're just dealing with the here and now.
Well, what do you want? Well, I want a healthy business, and I want more time for my family. Well, that's too vague. What's a healthy business, and what would it take to have a healthy business, and how much is enough? And then you have to have a plan to get there, and you can't have everything, right? So, and you have to be realistic on what's possible given where you are today, and confront the reality of the situation. And so, those are all things I think we help small business owners and entrepreneurs think about.
So
it's easy to go through the motions. It's easy to continue to do today what you've done every day for the last 5 years. That's easy. Disrupting yourself and setting a path for change and being intentional about it is hard. And that's the difference.
That's very, very true. on the small business side, talking about what are some things that you're doing specifically with small business? Any extra kind of special type things that you're dealing with there?
Yeah, I would say two things. I mean, I think one thing that we've helped small business owners do is understand their customers better and showing them the path to doing that. I mentioned the client advisory board. You know, my background is in advertising, where we would conduct focus groups. We've got a pretty good research partner, so we're able to do pretty specific quantitative and qualitative research and help a small business kind of assess their situation. I'll do executive retreats with leaders inside a small to mid-sized business, even large organizations, where through our process up front, we're able to go in and teach an executive team, business owners, things about their business, their culture, their customers that they did not know. And you know, that level of insight is very useful. So that's one thing. The second thing, and I say this a lot, is that particularly in a small business, sales is medicine. You know, when you have revenue coming in, that is the recipe and cure for a lot of problems. And it's one of the biggest barriers that I see with entrepreneurs is they might have a great idea, they might be particularly innovative, they might be tech savvy, but the whole idea of client acquisition is a challenge. If you haven't done it, if that's not your background, it's hard. So I think giving people a bit of a process discipline around go-to-market strategy is also very, very useful for most small businesses.
And you mentioned before we started recording that you're doing a kind of a special series of kind of small conferences for small business leaders as well.
Yeah, it's a series that's put on by JP Morgan Chase Bank, and it's their Business Insight Seminar Series. We're doing 20 cities. It's geared towards small business owners, so it's typically clients that come from their banking practice or potential clients. And I'm doing a 1 hour talk in that series called The Culture Imperative, how culture and customer obsession is the catalyst for small business growth. So we talk about the relationship between culture and customer experience and leveraging those things as a catalyst to grow your small business. So it's been a lot of fun. We're getting great feedback, and Chase has been a great partner.
Yeah, that's exciting. It's a pretty big deal to work with them, and great opportunity for you.
Yeah, it's been a great partnership.
Your website has a lot of resources on it. People that can go there. Can you talk a little bit about that? How they can find more information about you and those resources that are available?
Yeah, the website is ryanestes.com, and so we've got a research section. Our new ebook, Adapt and Thrive, is available for free download. I think that would be useful for any small business owner on the call. And then we're regularly updating content on our blog, which you can access via the homepage. And then our YouTube channel is a pretty robust channel with video content. We've got over 100 educational videos. It's all available for free. So.
Well, I can tell you that, one, you're an exciting individual to watch at a keynote, and a lot of valuable information. So there's one thing about having a exciting storyteller or exciting person to give a keynote, but if it's just fluff and there's not actually anything to take away, then it's not as relevant, obviously. I can tell you from my personal experience, I was able to easily reference back 3 pages of notes that I took, and they were actually things that, coming back, again, the challenge that I mentioned earlier, what are you going to do at 801? How are you actually going to implement a couple of these things was a really big game changer for me and for our business as well. So very cool to be able to have this conversation with you, and really cool to be able to get some introspect to what you're doing right now. So once again, thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule. It's really cool. Wish you the best learning how to surf. That seems exciting.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll be able to chat with you again in the near future.
Appreciate it, Chad. It was great. Thanks for having me on.
For those of you who are watching or listening for the first time, we have got close to 50 episodes available on our podcast. You can check them all out at Loc-Doc.net/podcast. You can see everything there, video and audio form. Make sure you subscribe to all of the podcast channels or wherever that you're watching or listening to this, so that you can get all the updates as we release them every Tuesday at 9 a.m. So once again, Ryan, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time here on the Coffee Break Podcast. To learn more about the topics discussed today and to connect with us online to hear all of the episodes available, visit Loc-Doc.net/podcast.
We got so much to say. We got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. It's time for a coffee break. Oh, yeah.
The Coffee Break Podcast is brought to you by Loc-Doc Security. We'd love to connect with you online on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Just search LOCDOCINC.